Welcome back. So, I've kind of been thinking about how I don't want to really say like media, but I was thinking about how we went from reading books and then people turning books into movies. And if you read books before you see the movies, you'll see how the books tend to be more in depth than how whoever created or recreated the books into an image for a movie. And usually when they make a movie, there's certain parameters that have to be met for screen time, per se. So if you read the book before seeing the movie, you'll be like, oh, they forgot this part, or why did they change this into that, or what made them switch this character to be like that. And most people that enjoy reading would say that they enjoy the books more than they enjoy they enjoy the books more than what's portrayed or relayed in the movie instead. And it's only because of like some of the details that sometimes are missed when trying to relate into an image. So there was this song that, because we didn't always have YouTube and phones that shows us the videos before hearing the songs, I heard a song. I heard the song before I saw the video. And that tends to happen to me often. I'll hear a song before I see the video. But I like the song so much, not even giving it a mental picture, but just listening to the words of the song, I enjoyed the song because I enjoy a storytelling type of song. Whether that is rap, country, opera, like if it's a good storytelling song, I'm going to enjoy it. But if it's just a lot of nonsense, I might not pay attention to it, because just know I like a good storytelling song. So because of the way that this artist created the song, it made me enjoy it that much that I was just like, even labeling it as one of my favorite songs. I'm going to say one of my favorite storytelling songs. But when I finally saw the imagery he used for what he created the song to be like, it made me like the song even more, because it was just like, I can tell the thought process behind the words that he was using, on top of him using imagery that like really depicted how he was trying to relay that song. And you don't always get that. Like I said before, most times people will take whatever is the story's trying to be portrayed as and change it once it gives it an imagery to it. But he he did in a sense, but it still fit exactly what I'm assuming he was trying to relay through whatever message he was trying to put out through the way that he creates art. And what kind of made me interested in this artist is he doesn't even have to, like, he chose to be an artist out of the thought process of knowing that he could. Not I need to do this to make it out or I need to do this to express my creativity. It was more so of like a joking manner. Like, I know I can do this, so I'm going to just do it because, like, it's not expected of me, but I can make this a thing if I want to make it a thing. And to me, as a person that thinks outside the box, it was just like, that's a different route to think about how to do things. And the fact that you want to do it that way it sparked my interest. So it made me look at how he does things, and it wasn't in a judgmental way. Even though on the opposite end, I don't know how judgmental he is as a person, but that's neither here nor there. But I was interested in the way he did it. Sparked an interest in the way that people kind of try to categorize people. Like his niche, I gravitated towards his niche. And the thing is like, even though I'm the type of person that should be offended by what was portrayed, I wasn't offended because of the type of intellect that he has. Like his niche is for intellectual people that are artists that may not know how to express what they're seeing and feeling in a way that doesn't get them killed, you know. But still, it was captivating, and I enjoy watching the way he creates because of that. And it made me think of how in one of his songs, like the song that I was speaking of, it kind of like showed the battle between understanding who God is and why God does the things that he does. And I didn't take it, even though it's portrayed in a joking manner, like I didn't take it as a mockery. I took it as someone genuinely having questions and wanting to know answers. And as an artist expressing it in these ways to be able to express those like taboo questions where you don't know how people will respond. You don't know what answer you will receive, but it's just asking because you genuinely want to know. It's like it's basically who God is. So it's like God isn't gonna force himself on you. He's not gonna force his understanding on you. He gravitates more towards those with genuine hearts who want to know and are coming to him in a humble spirit, asking these questions to be able to give them a I'm going to say the word spark, but that mustard seed of faith to be able to intrigue somebody enough to continue trying to cultivate a relationship with him, to genuinely get to know who he is. So it's like dating. Like you don't go into a date and spill out all of your information to somebody on the first date. That'll run them away. Like, people don't like that. Like, just out of societal norms or social norms, like, that's not something that you would typically do. And that's even funnier because that's kind of was portrayed. But anyway, so it's like God allowing people to get to know him without pressuring them to commit to him. Because unbeknownst to people that want to make him out to be this authoritarian type of person, he don't want to be in a relationship with nobody that don't want to be in a relationship with him. Like, he's not forcing people to choose him. Like, if you genuinely want to know him, he will give you that opportunity and space to get to know him, to cultivate a relationship, to be one of his children. But if you playing around with him and his feelings, he gonna cut you off. Like like he said, he'll spit you out. He would rather you be hot or cold. Like, ain't no in the middle. Like a relationship. You don't want somebody that's sometimes with you. Like, either you want me or you don't. If not, I'm going to walk away. That's why I often say it's a relationship. And that's why the Bible often compares his relationship to his children as like a marriage. Because that's the picture to the words. That's the way it has to be displayed in the imagery for people to understand what they're reading. But I don't know exactly who the lesson was for, but I was going through like the thought processes of what I'm assuming I'm just going to say genuine love is. Like, I think of marriage often, and I believe that's because that's a desire for me. So I feel like oftentimes I ask God, like, why hasn't it happened yet? Like, why don't I even feel like I'm moving towards the mark of marriage? But he had to have me think or realize that even though it doesn't physically seem like it, he's working on me inwardly to be able to maintain a marriage. Like, even though I feel like I might be, I've always felt like a wife, like, if that makes sense. Like, I've always known that that's a part of my life. But because the way that God's intention for marriage is, for me, he would much rather shape and mature me into the person that is ready for a lasting marriage than to throw me into one to try to figure it out and then possibly go through divorce because I did it instead of allowing him to do it, which can cause other I want to say traumas that are unnecessary if I would just wait on God's timing, because he's trying to to ensure that when it's time, it's mature minded enough to make it last. And that's not even just in a marriage sense. Like, you can take that and think of that in like a business sense as well. There's people that's just like, I don't understand why my business hasn't taken off. I don't understand why there's so many obstacles to just get this thing up and running. And it's like, sometimes people say it all the time, don't despise the humble beginnings or the small beginnings, because it takes a certain mindset to be able to maintain a thing. And in those beginning stages where you're, I don't want to say fumbling, but sometimes it do be a fumble. Sometimes you're fumbling through the starting points to be able to get the understanding of what's needed to be able to maintain. So how we got to hear from love? It feel all over the place because the thought process have been all over the place, because it's so many aspects of God that are in so many different areas of life that still brings it back to him, because that's just who he is. So it's going to sound like I'm taking it in another direction. I kind of am, but this is how I was thinking about it as well. He mentions kingdoms in the word often. And because of the generation I grew up in and how I was, I guess the ethnicity that God chose me to be a part of, I don't think of kingdoms. I don't think of queens and kings and that type of hierarchies, because that's not the mindset that I was brought up in, because that's not a picture that was portrayed to my ethnicity. So I don't think of my life in that way. But God has been kind of showing me through different things. Like I'm reading a book that has something like that in it, or I was watching a movie that kind of betrays something like that. And it was like, these people in kingdom do things differently to maintain this kingdom likeness. And there are people or characters in these different imageries that was showed to me to kind of have this understanding, that would either want to really play that role of the kingdomness, and then there were people that were trying to run away from being a part of the stereotypes that come with being in those type of environments. So because in my natural, that's not natural for me, God trying to show me how we are in a kingdomship in the spiritual realm was just like, Lord, why why are you showing me this in this way? And it was to try to get that deeper understanding for our relationship, to be honest with you. Because, like, I don't want to say our relationship was surface level, but it was more so of that this is who God is, and this is how I'm supposed to show up as somebody that believes in what he's saying. And there was a shift to, you don't have to just believe that this is what I'm saying. You have to accept that this is a reality. And that shift was just like, okay, well, if this is a reality and this is not something that I'm used to understanding as a reality, I'm just used to it being a storyline. How am I supposed to live out the imagery of what is written for what this walk is supposed to be like? And because it was a storyline before, it's hard to make that transition to realize that those stories were reality, and we're still walking in that same reality, even though we're learning from a book, which is the storyline of the reality from that timing. So, how to make that more understandable? Even though I've never met a king or a queen or a prince in reality, there's pictures depicting these things because they have taken place. Like, I really don't want to just be throwing movie titles out there, but there's movies out there that portray my ethnicity as kings and queens, and I'm pretty sure there are other countries that still have their historical museums showing their people of my ethnicity as kings and queens. But because that's something that my heritage was taken out from that, I don't see that aspect of it. I don't know that aspect of it as a reality. So to me, it's really foreign. Like, that's a foreign thought to even think of. But when I read the word, it's saying that this is a reality for me. So for me to try to grasp that, it's a hard concept. And it's just like, that's how it is for others when they're thinking of, why do we believe in something that we're just reading about and don't see the physical representation of what we believe in so much? And the difference is, it's like, from our perspective, it's not just reading, it's God literally trying to show us that that's in us. Like, that's who he created. That's what we are. That is reality. But because the imagery was taken away, it makes it seem like that's not the reality, even though it is. So for someone outside looking in and seeing people constantly show up in this image that isn't, it's seen in the spirit, but it's not showing physically, doesn't make sense. And for us, it's like us believing in a spiritual, but not having the imagery for it to make sense, but still walking in it because it is us. So how to bring that back around? It's the same thing as for me, like saying, I just know that I'm a wife, but physically I'm not a wife. Not yet. Like, in the natural, to the standards of marital license and actually even physically having a person here. I'm not a wife yet, but I know I am. So it's just like, it's the same thing. Whew. Okay, so let's bring this back, because like I said, the thought process has been all over the place, but it all comes back to pretty much being the same thing. But I'm not trying to confuse anybody with not being able to have it mapped out in a concise order. So, how we got here? I was thinking about how to know that you really, genuinely, and truly love somebody, it's those times where you know you won't benefit from showing how much you love them at all, but still showing up in that love that is the evidence of how much you love somebody. And it's what really brought me into that thought process is how someone would make a decision knowing how it would affect someone else, but going through with it because they know that the outcome will show how much they love them by what they chose to do. So I was thinking about how people leave inheritance to their children, and how the people that receive those inheritances probably do not care about the inheritance as much as they would rather have the person physically be there. So it's like, I was thinking about, like, what if my husband thought that he had to choose between physically being around me and not being around me for the benefit of showing how much he loves me? And I was just thinking to myself, like, I would much rather have the physical representation of the love than the distance to try to show how much the love is there. And I'm just, because I'm always in my head thinking about some stuff. I'm just like, that's a crazy thought process to have. But I was just like, well, Jesus kind of did the same thing. Like, all the way up to God even expressing himself through Jesus in that sense. So it was just like, Jesus even started praying to God, like, take this task from me. Like, if I don't have to go through with this, take it from me so that I don't have to go through with it. But if this is what you need me to do, I'm going to do it all the way to the end, because that's how much I love you. And from a God perspective, it's like, I don't want you to even do this, but I have to have you do this for how much I love all my children. And it's like Jesus goes and he's praying to the Father all the way to the point where he's dripping blood as sweat. And he doesn't hear an answer from God then. Like, God doesn't come and comfort him himself. There's times where Jesus got baptized and God's voice came down and encouraged him and like, this is my son from who I'm well pleased. But here he is finna suffer and he doesn't hear God's comforting at all. Like, not saying that he don't hear God's comforting, because the word says that an angel came and strengthened him. But to go from being baptized and your father showing up like, yeah, I'm glad you're doing this, to I'm about to suffer and I don't hear from you at all, is like, it had me thinking about like the aspects of the having to leave or not be around to show how much the love is intended. So the whole purpose of Jesus dying or going to the cross was because of sin. And sin is what separates us from God. So at this time, this is Jesus taking on all of earth or the world's sin. And that is him praying to the Father, is that physical representation of the physical separation that sin brings. It's the barrier that's keeping us from God. So it wasn't that God wasn't trying to answer Jesus or let him know that I'm here for you, because he sent an angel to comfort him. Like, that was so in Luke 22 through 43, in that text it says, okay, let's go back a little bit. So it's Luke 22:42 is when he starts praying. It says, Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. 43 says, and an angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. It's like God knowing that he can't be in the room because of the sin, but still sending that Jesus-like person to be the middle person, to show up, to show that I still love you, I'm still in the midst, but I can't be a part of that. But my purpose in that has a bigger, my imagery in that has a bigger purpose for what I need to accomplish for all my children to be able to understand the type of God that I am. Like, I still love you despite the sin, and I'm still going to show up and try to cultivate this relationship or bring this relationship back to the order that it should be in, despite the, I'm going to just say, messiness of this situation. Because Jesus really didn't do anything to have to deserve to go to the cross. So the situation in itself is messy, because like, God didn't have to send Jesus to earth for people's sin. Like, he could have just kept Jesus to himself. But that's like a parent keeping their children from the being able to meet people to have grandkids. Like, but God, he does what he does to be able to do what he does. So when he writes in his word that he's blotting out your sins for his sake, he literally means that. Like, he's putting a blinder over what he knows is a actual separation from you and him, so that he can continue showing up as the loving father that he is, despite the obstacles of being who he is. Like, his words doesn't change. Like, what he says it remains the same, but because of who he is, he's a creator. He's the creator. He can change what he's established in a way to fit what he's established because of who he is. So if he decides to send a piece of him to the earth to be the carrier of sins, to kill it so that we can come back to him as blemishless. That's what he'll do, to be able to physically represent what is taking place in a spiritual realm, to fit what his word says cannot change. So that's why when Jesus would say that he came to fulfill the law, that would make sense, because it's like what God has said wouldn't make sense if Jesus isn't able to fulfill what he was here sent to do. So it's like, the piece of the father that has to die for the son to be able to enter into the king role that would be his next step, if you're talking in the kingdom sense. And it's like, the person that left the inheritance is still a part of the kingdom, even though they're not physically there anymore. But what the foundation they laid is still showing up in the next generation because of kingdom business, of how things are in a kingdom sense. Y'all, I do not know kingdomness enough to be trying to explain this in a way that it makes sense to an intellectual, because I don't, like I said, The generation I was brought up in wasn't under kingdoms and things like that. So for me to try to explain it is hard because I wasn't really, paying attention in history class like that. But I do read this Bible, and the Bible say in 1 Corinthians that God uses the foolish things as wisdom. And this is not coming out how I intended it, but that's okay. Because it leaves that room for you to cultivate that relationship with God the way that, y'all talk to each other. So I would say go read 1 Corinthians 5:18 through 31 and chapter, did I say 5? 1 Corinthians chapter 1, 18 through 31, chapter 2, verse 1 through 16, to understand what he is trying to portray in the whole death of Christ, to confuse the scholars who feel like what God is truly doing to be a way of mockery. But another thing that kind of stood out when I was going through this whole thought process was kind of like labels. And like I said, there's a certain group of people that try to take things and make it a mockery, and God really shows up and twists it to work out in his favor, to show who he is. And one of those terms was like friend. And how it was used was how to show love, a friend would lay down their life. And it kind of tied into that whole what true love is like. So I've been kind of battling with this whole like possession type of thing. And me and God be tussling. I'd be like, I don't understand how, if I'm a vessel, if I'm your vessel and I'm filled with the Holy Spirit and you dwell in me, how are demons able to show up and mock that they're I want to say quote unquote doing the same thing? Like, to me, I'm like, God, is it you or is it them? Like, let me know, because I'm out here saying that, I'm filled with the Holy Spirit and I'm moving in what the Lord is telling me to do. But you got these people showing up mocking what I believe is to be you. And God is like still trying to show me how it's that physical representation of what Christ went through, to understand like the whole aspect of being who his children are. like, I had to realize, like, how much they were mocking Christ and doing what he kept saying was his father's calling for him to do as well. And it was people literally telling him that he was demon possessed and that it wasn't of God, because outside looking in, it's like there's sorcerers and magicians that are doing the same thing, and they're not calling it God. The only difference is you calling it God, and these people doing the same exact thing and mocking you in your face. Like, I don't know about y'all, but that'll cause a tussle, like, for real. But God constantly has to show, like, there's a difference. And the difference is how it's literally faith compared to people trying to make it works. So when there's like a people out there trying to use the, I'm gonna have to say the word law, as a way of debunking what God is doing, God has to show how faith is literally the representation of what his truth is. So when Jesus say he has to go away to go to his Father so that greater things can take place, and I'm sitting here and feeling like demons is taking over and being able to just use me like a wet rag, I'm like, Lord, what is the purpose in this? Like, if you can take this cup from me, let's go ahead and remove this. But it's literally our time's physical representation of what God has been doing from the beginning. And it's strengthening his children to realize that you've already had a physical representation do it before, to show you that you can get through it too. And it's like he literally laid down his life for us and then called us his friend before even doing it. So when I was reading how Jesus was praying through these times, what kind of stood out to me was the word sorrow. So Luke 22 verse 45 shows how the disciples was exhausted from sorrow. And the disciples, Jesus had brought the disciples along to the garden for him to pray. Like, he brought them with him, but he didn't really explain what he was, going to the garden to do. Like, he was trying to prepare them to let them know that he was about to die. But they didn't know the depth of what he was saying, because like he said before, like, he wasn't making it plain to them, like, this is what he was about to do. So when I was reading it, and it said that so Luke 22:45 says, when he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. That was a spiritual representation of what his friends was feeling for him, not even knowing the depth of what his love was finna show for them. But Jesus even used that term while he was praying. So Mark 14. Mark 14:34 says, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. He said it to the disciples. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. He said to them, stay here and keep watch. Like, he was, I don't even want to say prophesying what was finna take place, because he had already been telling them what was finna take place before it even had got to this point. But what he was going through, like, transferred over to the disciples to the point where they couldn't even stay awake. Like, they had to sleep off what Jesus was feeling physically, and trying to pray to the Father to relieve. Like, have you ever had a headache so bad that medicine ain't even helping? All you can do is sleep. Like, you have to, for me, it's allergies. Like, sometimes my eyes get so itchy and watery, and to the point where I have to close my eyes. Like, the suffering be that much where it's just like, if I don't close my eyes, I'll just be sitting there suffering even more. Like, I end up falling asleep, but I have to sleep. Like, some things are just so heavy. And it's so heavy to the point, like, you don't have an explanation for it, but you know that it's a reality because it's physically showing up as what it is. So even though you might not have the words to explain these things, the reality is showing up as what it is to express the intention of what God purposed behind it. So even though from a different perspective, it can be seen as a mockery, from the people that's truly trying to get some understanding or want to cultivate an actual relationship on what this God thing is, and what his purpose in doing things that don't make sense is, those little reminders be needed when they need it. Jesus needed that strengthening from that angel. Because to be sinless and to bear sin to death, to give your Father the glory, when you've been in his glory before, so you know what being under his glory is really like. To have all that stripped away and to have to suffer in a way that just don't make sense for who you are. That's real love. And even though you're not showing, people may look at you and feel like you're not showing up in a way that will make sense for who you are. The spiritual realm know that you're showing up the way that you should for who you are. So it's like when Jesus went back to sitting at the right hand side of his Father, I'm pretty sure that was a different type of joy and connection and understanding and love that was built between them two because of following it all the way through to the end. So when Jesus was explaining how what he was about to go through could be seen as grievance. I don't even know if that's a word, but that moment of grief is needed for the joy that is going to come to those who accepted him for who he is, because it's the truth sent from the Father. He getting his son back. He restoring the first intent, and he's saving all his children to be able to come into his kingdomship. Like from what I've been reading, like kings and queens, they be partying. Like they just, it's always a joyful, it's joyous. It's ghetto from what I've been reading too. They messy too, but that's the flesh. That flesh is messy. That's what flesh do. But that's a worldly sense. So imagine what being in the kingdom really finna be like. So we got to remember there's an enemy that is trying to do any and everything that they can to strip us from that. But Jesus said this type of joy can't nobody take from us. And it might not make sense because we ain't never seen it before. But it's written the way it's written to be written for the way it's written so that it can make sense for the people that it's written for. And that's all I got for y'all for now. Until next time.